If you spent any time at all in front of a television set during, say, the late 90s or the early 2000s, you know exactly who we're talking about today.
Oh, absolutely, especially in that hazy midday block of programming.
Right between the soap operas and the evening news, there's this very specific image that is probably burned into your retinas.
I can picture the scene perfectly. The studio lights are dimmed down, the audience is sitting there in a sort of reverent silence,
Yeah.
and center stage, just completely commanding the room, is this woman who looks, less like a traditional mystic and more like the toughest ant at the family barbecue.
That is the perfect description. We are, of course, talking about Sylvia Browne. The gravelly voice, the long acrylic nails, the heavy jewelry. She was an absolute fixture.
A pillar of American pop culture for a time. She wasn't just a guest on these shows. She became an institution, especially on the Montel Williams Show and Larry King Live.
And the books, I had to double check this number because it honestly sounds fake. She wrote 40 books.
40. It's a staggering output. We aren't talking about, obscure self-published pamphlets from the back of a van.
No, not at all.
Many of these were New York Times bestsellers.
Yeah.
She had this client list that reportedly included celebrities, heads of state, and at her peak, she had a waiting list for a personal reading that stretched out for years.
4 years, I think. A 4-year wait.
Imagine that.
She was, without a single doubt, the most famous psychic in America for a very, very long time. But today, we're not here to just do a biography of a celebrity.
No.
We're not here to just, reminisce about old daytime TV. We're here to conduct an audit.
That is the key word right there. Audit. Because Sylvia Browne wasn't just an entertainer. She was a business. She was an industry. And unlike a lot of figures in the paranormal world who kind of stay vague and shadowy, Sylvia Browne left behind a massive, tangible paper trail.
And that is the mission for this deep dive. We are going to look past the crystal ball, past the incense. We're going to open the filing cabinets.
And we have the documents to do it.
We do. We have court records from her legal battles. We have police files from investigations she inserted herself into. We have actual statistical studies that analyzed her accuracy rating.
And we have the transcripts. Thousands of hours of tape where she made specific falsifiable claims. The goal here is really to measure the distance between what she said would happen
and what actually happened.
Exactly.
It's a story about belief, certainly, but it's also a story about the media, about capitalism, and about the incredibly high stakes of telling people what they want to hear, or maybe more often, what they fear to hear.
It really sits at this strange intersection of grief and hope and the entertainment industry. As we start to peel back the layers, I think you're going to be surprised by just how mechanical this magic actually was.
So let's start at the beginning. Before all the TV cameras, before the bestsellers, who was Sylvia Browne?
Well, she was born Sylvia Select Shoemaker. That was on October 19th, 1936 in Kansas City, Missouri. And if you really want to understand the product she eventually sold to the world, you have to look at the environment she was, manufactured in.
Right.
Her childhood was essentially a masterclass in religious syncretism.
Religious potluck was the term I saw used, and I love that. It wasn't just one strict dogma she was raised in.
Not at all. It was a buffet. She was raised primarily Catholic, which gave her that whole foundation of saints, rituals, high drama, heaven and hell.
Had a very structured belief system.
Very. But her family tree was like a theological map of the world. Her father was Jewish, her mother was Episcopalian, her grandmother was Lutheran.
That is a lot of competing narratives for a child to absorb. Catholic guilt, Jewish tradition, Protestant work ethic. It's all in there.
It is. But think about how that serves her later in life. She learned the language of all these different faiths. She understood the core tenets, the anxieties, the hopes of each one.
So she could tailor her message.
Perfectly. It allowed her to build this brand of spirituality that was incredibly accessible. It was low friction. She could talk to a Jewish client or a Baptist client and, speak their language. She wasn't asking them to convert.
She didn't alienate anyone because she was a little bit of everything.
Precisely. She wasn't saying abandon your faith. She was saying, let me add my special insight on top of it.
So that's the religious foundation, but then there's the psychic element. Where does that come in?
Well, that's the origin myth, and it's something she curated very, very carefully. According to her own autobiography, the vision started when she was just 3 years old.
3. Most of us are just learning to string sentences together, and she's claiming she's seeing the other side.
She described seeing faces in the windows, people who weren't there. Now, in most households in 1939 Missouri, a child claiming to see ghosts might have been, taken to a priest for an exorcism or a doctor for a checkup.
Yeah.
But Sylvia had an enabler.
The grandmother.
Her grandmother, Ada Coyle. This is the pivotal figure in the whole Sylvia Browne mythos.
Mm-hmm.
Ada was a practicing medium herself.
So it was in the family.
It was. So when young Sylvia said, "I see dead people," Ada didn't say, "Honey, stop making up stories." She said, "That's a gift. Let me help you understand it."
Wow. That is a massive reinforcement loop, right? You're being told that what might just be childhood imagination is actually a superpower.
And it wasn't just the grandmother. She also had a great uncle who was a medium, and he was described as being rabid about UFOs.
Oh, of course. Why not?
So you've got this incredible cocktail. You have the Catholic saints, the Jewish traditions, the Lutheran grandmother talking to spirits, and the great uncle watching the skies for flying saucers.
It's the perfect incubator for a modern paranormal celebrity. You couldn't write a better backstory.
You really couldn't. She was steeped in the supernatural as just a mundane fact of life. So you fast forward a few decades, she tries to live a normal life for a while. She teaches school, but eventually, the gift takes center stage. She starts doing readings professionally in 1973.
But she don't just want to be a local fortune teller, right? Not just someone with a neon sign in their living room window. She wanted legitimacy. She wanted
structure.
She wanted an institution. And in 1986, in Campbell, California, she founded one. The Society of Novus Spiritus.
The Society of the New Spirit.
Exactly. And she defined it as a Gnostic Christian church. And this, whether it was calculated or just intuitive, is a brilliant business move.
How so?
By wrapping her psychic business in the cloak of a church, she achieves two critical things. First, there are, the obvious tax benefits, which we can get into. But secondly, and I think more importantly, it elevates her from a performer to a spiritual leader.
That changes the nature of the criticism, doesn't it? If you attack a psychic, you're just a skeptic. If you attack a religious leader...
being intolerant, you're attacking their faith. It provides an incredible shield.
And within this new church, this theology, she developed a very specific cast of characters. We can't really discuss Sylvia Browne without talking about her co-pilot.
Her spirit guide.
Francine. I feel like Francine was the co-host of Sylvia's entire life.
It really seems that way.
Essentially, yes. Francine was the entity from the other side that Sylvia claimed fed her all of her information. She'd often say things like, "Well, I don't know the answer, but let me ask Francine."
This is a classic mediumship technique, isn't it? It creates a buffer.
It's a firewall.
Right. If the information turns out to be wrong, well, the connection with Francine must have been fuzzy that day. The reception was bad. It's not Sylvia's fault.
It creates plausible deniability. I'm just the messenger. But let's look at what being the messenger paid. Because while Francine might have been a spirit, the checks she generated were very, very tangible.
Okay, so let's get into the business side of things. This was not a hobby.
This was a massive enterprise. In that 2010 interview with our business manager, Linda Rossi, it was revealed that the Sylvia Browne Corporation and its affiliates were bringing in $3 million a year.
$3 million a year? That puts her in the CEO bracket of some pretty major companies.
And you have to look at the diversity of the revenue streams. It's really impressive from a business perspective.
Break it down for us.
Okay, so first you have the book royalties, which were substantial. Like we said, 40 books. She was churning them out at a Stephen King pace.
The sellers, too.
Many of them. But then you have the readings. At her peak, a telephone reading, just a phone call, cost anywhere from $700 to over $850.
For how long?
For 20 to 30 minutes.
Wow. And people paid that.
They lined up for it. There was a 4-year waiting list.
I can't get my head around that. You wait 4 years for a phone call. By the time you actually get the call, the problem you wanted advice on has probably resolved itself. Or you've completely forgotten what it was.
That is the level of devotion she inspired. And then on top of that, there were the psychic cruises.
This part fascinated me when I was reading the source material. The idea of hundreds of people paying thousands of dollars each to be essentially trapped on a boat with her.
It's the ultimate immersive experience. It's brilliant marketing. You're surrounded by fellow believers. You attend her seminars. You get readings. It creates this reinforced echo chamber where everyone agrees that this is all real. It cements their loyalty.
But, and this is where we have to pivot to the audit part of our show. Running a $3 million a year empire requires some business acumen. And it turns out the law had some questions about Sylvia Browne's business practices long before she became a household name on TV.
This is the chapter of her life that usually gets scrubbed from the dust jackets of her books. In the late 1980s, while her church was growing, the FBI and local authorities in Santa Clara began an investigation. And I want to be very clear here.
Yeah.
They weren't investigating her for fake ghost stories. They weren't auditing her connection to Francine.
They weren't checking her ectoplasm levels.
No. They were investigating her for bank loans and financial irregularities. And in 1992, Sylvia Browne and her then-husband, Kensel Browne, were indicted on felony charges.
And the charges were serious, not a slap on the wrist.
Not at all. Investment fraud and grand theft.
And what was the scheme?
Specifically, they were selling securities in a gold mining venture.
A gold mine. It sounds like something out of an old Western movie. There's gold and then there are hills. It's just the classic snake oil pitch.
It's one of the oldest tricks in the book. The promise of incredible wealth from some hidden resource that you just need a little capital to access.
So what did they do wrong?
The Superior Court of Santa Clara County found that they had sold these securities under false pretenses. But here's the detail that really highlights the crossover between her business and her faith.
Lay it out for us.
Okay, so there was this specific instance cited in the court records. A couple invested $20,000. They were told this money was for immediate operating costs of the gold mine, equipment, labor, fuel.
Standard business investment stuff. Makes sense.
Instead, the money was immediately transferred into an account for the Nirvana Foundation for Psychic Research.
Oh, so they took money intended for a gold mine and funneled it directly into her psychic foundation.
Which is a clear misappropriation of funds. It's textbook fraud. Browne ultimately pleaded no contest to securities fraud.
And for anyone listening who isn't a lawyer, no contest is pretty significant. It basically means I'm not admitting I'm guilty, but I acknowledge you have enough evidence to convict me, and I'm going to accept the punishment.
She was sentenced to 1 year of probation and 200 hours of community service. Now, just pause and think about this for a second.
Okay.
In 1992, she is a convicted fraudster. She has a felony record for lying about money. In almost any other profession, if you were a banker, a lawyer, a stockbroker, your career is over. You're done.
You lose your license. You're unhireable.
But in the world of the paranormal,
It barely made a dent. In fact, her biggest, most famous years were still ahead of her.
it's incredible.
How do you explain that? I mean, how does an audience reconcile convicted financial fraudster with trusted spiritual guide?
It is a masterclass in compartmentalization. Her followers, and just as importantly, the TV producers who hired her, they just separated the two things.
So the fraud conviction was just a business mistake.
A business mistake, a misunderstanding, or even persecution by the government. They refused to let it taint the gift. They basically said, well, maybe she's bad at gold mining, but she's still great at talking to angels.
Which is such a dangerous distinction to make because at the core of both activities is the issue of truth-telling, of integrity.
Exactly. If someone is willing to defraud investors in a gold scheme, why on earth would we assume they have unimpeachable integrity when telling a grieving mother about her missing child?
And that question brings us to the main stage, the television era. This is where Sylvia Browne went from being a successful, local California psychic to a national phenomenon. And the vehicle for that was the Montel Williams show.
It was a perfectly symbiotic relationship. Montel needed ratings, and Sylvia delivered them in spades. She was electric on camera, she was quick, she was authoritative, and she was dramatic.
But the format of these shows, we really need to scrutinize what was actually happening.
It wasn't just light entertainment. They were doing these segments they called psychic detective work.
And this is where the ethical line gets crossed and then just completely erased. You would have families, parents, siblings who are living through the absolute worst nightmare of their lives.
Unimaginable pain.
A child is missing, a murder is unsolved, and they put them on a stage under the hot lights right next to Sylvia Browne.
And she didn't just offer condolences or vague spiritual comfort. She offered facts, or at least what sounded like facts.
She would hold their hands, look them right in the eye, and say things like, he is in water, or he is deceased, or look for a man in a red truck. She spoke with this absolute, unwavering certainty. There was no, I might be wrong, or this is just a feeling. It was, this is what Francine tells me.
So we have the tape. We have years and years of these predictions. Let's do the math. How accurate was she really? Because she often claimed these incredible accuracy ratings, like 85, 90%.
If you listen to her, she rarely missed. If you listen to the data, she rarely hit.
There have been several rigorous studies on this. One of the most famous was conducted by the magazine Brill's Content back in 2000. They analyzed 10 episodes of Montel Williams, and they looked at 35 specific cases she worked on.
And what was the verdict?
Well, in 21 of those 35 cases, the information she gave was so vague, it was completely useless. This is the classic Barnum effect, or cold reading.
Right, like saying, I see a dark figure, or I feel a pain in the chest.
Exactly. That could apply to almost anyone or any situation. It's not verifiable. It's just throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks.
So what about the other cases? The ones where she gave specific details?
In the remaining 14 cases where she gave details that could be check names, locations, descriptions from law enforcement, or the family members themselves, confirmed that she provided zero useful information.
So effectively, she was no help at all.
But it gets worse. Much worse. In 2010, the Skeptical Inquirer Journal published a 3-year longitudinal study. This was done by Ryan Schaffer and Agatha Jadwisak. And they didn't just watch the shows. They tracked the outcomes of the cases years later.
So they were fact-checking her after the fact.
Yes, they looked at 115 different cases she commented on. And here's the crucial part.
Go on.
They identified 25 cases where the final outcome was definitively known, meaning the missing person was found alive, or the body was recovered, or the crime was solved. In those 25 cases, Sylvia Browne was wrong in every single one.
Wait, say that again?
In the 25 cases where we know for a fact what happened, she was wrong 100% of the time.
0 for 25.
A 100% failure rate in the verifiable sample. The study's conclusion, and I'm quoting here, was that she was not even mostly correct in a single case.
That's profound. I mean, even by random chance, if you just guessed dead or alive, you should be right about half the time.
You should be at 50%.
To be wrong every single time. That implies there's a systemic flaw in the method. It's almost harder to be wrong 100% of the time than to get a few right by accident.
It suggests that her method was likely relying on, statistical probability and cold reading biases. She was probably guessing the most likely tragic outcome for a missing person's case. But when the reality of a case deviated from that norm, like when someone was found alive, she was completely exposed.
I want to zoom in on a few of these specific cases because saying she was wrong is abstract. But when you look at the human cost of these failures, it's just devastating. We have to talk about Shawn Hornbeck.
The Shawn Hornbeck case is the smoking gun of her entire career. This is the one case that, in a just world, should have ended her television run permanently.
So set the scene for us.
It's 2002. Shawn Hornbeck is an 11-year-old boy in Missouri. He goes for a bike ride one afternoon and just vanishes. His parents, Craig and Pam Akers, are absolutely destroyed. They're desperate for any answer, any lead.
A total nightmare.
So a year later, in 2003, they appear on the Montel Williams show.
And they turn to Sylvia Browne for help.
And Sylvia looks them in the eye and delivers a death sentence. She tells them he's no longer with us. She tells them their son is dead.
Can you even imagine hearing that? The one thing you are praying isn't true, and the supposed authority confirms your worst fear on national television.
And she didn't stop there. She gave specifics. She described the kidnapper. She said it was a dark-skinned Hispanic man with dreadlocks. She described a location near 2 jagged boulders.
So the parents go home. They essentially stop looking for their son, and they start looking for a body. They start looking for a Hispanic man with dreadlocks.
For 4 years. 4 years of mourning a child who was, in fact, still alive.
Because he was found.
In 2007, a miracle happened. Shawn Hornbeck was found alive, less than an hour away from his own home. He had been kidnapped, yes, but the details.
Let's check the scorecard on her predictions.
The kidnapper was a man named Michael Devlin. He was a Caucasian man.
So wrong race.
He had short brown hair.
No dreadlocks.
And of course, the biggest one. He wasn't dead. She failed on every single specific, verifiable data point she provided. And the cruelty of it. She stole hope from that family for 4 long years.
Did she ever apologize? I mean, when he was found alive, did she come out and say, I'm so sorry, I got it terribly wrong?
No. She went on the Today Show and gave this classic non-apology. She said, I'm not God. I've never claimed to be 100% right.
Which is a massive pivot from the absolute certainty she projects when the cameras are rolling on Montel and a grieving family is sitting in front of her.
It's pure gaslighting. It's rewriting history to protect the brand.
And sadly, as the data shows, Shawn Hornbeck wasn't an isolated incident. We have to mention Amanda Berry.
Oh, this one is just heartbreaking. Cleveland, 2004.
Yes.
Amanda Berry disappears. Her mother, Luana Miller, is frantic. A year later, she goes on the show. Sylvia takes her hand and says, and I want to quote this exactly because the tone is so jarringly casual, She's not alive, honey.
She's not alive, honey. It's so casual. It's like she's delivering bad news about a car repair, not telling a mother her daughter is dead.
It's chilling. And then she added more details. She told the mother that she saw Amanda's jacket in the garbage with DNA on it. She said she was in water.
And the reality, which we now know.
Amanda Berry was alive. She was being held captive by Ariel Castro in that house of horrors in Cleveland. She finally escaped in May of 2013.
But her mother wasn't there to see it.
No. Luana Miller died of heart failure in 2006. She spent the last 2 years of her life believing her daughter was dead because Sylvia Browne told her so.
So she went to her grave without the one thing that could have given her some measure of peace, the truth that her daughter was still fighting, still surviving.
That is the real moral weight of this. It's not just harmless entertainment when it directly impacts how a mother spends her final days on Earth.
And some authorities actually recognize this, right?
The UK did. Their television regulator, Ofcom, sanctioned the network ITV2 for re-airing the Shawn Hornbeck episode. They officially ruled that it caused harm and offense. But in the U.S., the show went on.
You would think with failures this public and this catastrophic, she would lose her audience. But she had a technique for handling misses, didn't she? Or rather, for handling breaking news in real time. You call it retrofitting.
The Sago mine disaster in 2006 is the perfect laboratory example of this, because it happened live, on air.
I remember this so clearly. The explosion in West Virginia, 13 miners trapped underground. The whole country was watching, just waiting for news.
It was chaos, and a lot of misinformation was flying around. Late at night, reports started coming out from sources on the ground that 12 of the 13 miners were found alive. People were celebrating. Church bells were ringing.
Anderson Cooper was reporting it on CNN. It was the miracle at Sago.
Right. So, in the middle of this national celebration, Sylvia Browne is a guest on the overnight radio show Coast to Coast AM. The host, George Norrie, asks her about the miners. Now remember, the news ticker at this exact moment says alive.
So what does Sylvia say?
She says, I knew they were going to be found. She claims she never felt the heavy energy of death around the situation.
Yeah.
She aligns herself perfectly with breaking news. She takes credit for the miracle.
Of course she does.
But then, while they are still on the air, the correction comes in. The reports were tragically wrong. 12 of the miners were dead. Only one had survived.
The air just goes out of the room. The reality flips 180 degrees. What does Sylvia do?
This is the moment that reveals everything. Later in the same show, after the news has been corrected, she says, and this is a direct quote, I don't think there's anybody alive. I did believe that they were gone.
Wait, she literally contradicted herself within the span of, what, an hour?
Yes, on the same broadcast. When the news said alive, she said, I knew they were found. When the news said dead, she said, I believe they were gone.
That is irrefutable proof. She wasn't reading the spirits. She was reading the news ticker.
She was retrofitting her vision to match the available information in real time. It's a simple parlor trick, but it was exposed in the harshest, most tragic possible light.
So with a track record like this, the fraud conviction, the 100% failure rate in solved cases, the live flip-flopping, where were the critics? I mean, why wasn't she just laughed out of every television studio?
Oh, the critics are there. They were loud. And the loudest, most persistent voice in the room was James Randi.
The amazing Randi, a legendary magician and a professional debunker of paranormal claims.
Randi was the perfect adversary for her because he knew the tricks. He knew how cold reading worked, how hot reading worked. He understood the mechanics of the illusion, and he had the ultimate weapon.
The $1 million paranormal challenge.
A simple premise. Prove your psychic powers under mutually agreed-upon scientific conditions, and you get a check for $1 million.
And Sylvia, in what must have been a moment of incredible hubris, agreed to it.
She did. On Larry King Live in September 2001, with millions of people watching, Larry King put her on the spot, and she said yes, she would take the challenge. She said she had nothing to hide.
I'm guessing she never cashed that check.
She spent the next decade running away from it. By 2003, she still hadn't contacted Randi, so people started asking why. She started making excuses. First, she claimed Randi wouldn't put the money in escrow. She implied he didn't actually have the money.
Which was a bluff on her part.
A bluff Randi called immediately. He went to his bank, got a notarized copy of the account balance showing over $1 million, and mailed it to her office.
And did she accept it?
She refused to sign for the certified letter. It was returned to sender. She physically refused to even look at the proof. Randi then offered to put the money in escrow, even though his own rules didn't require it, just to get her to show up.
And she still wouldn't do it.
She ignored it completely.
Because she knew she'd fail. You don't leave $1 million on the table if you can actually talk to the dead. You take the money and build a bigger church.
Finally, in 2007, her business manager issued a statement basically saying Sylvia had nothing to prove to James Randi. And that's the classic retreat. When science asks for data, the psychic demands you just have faith.
It wasn't just Randi, though. The internet was starting to keep score. There was that site, Stop Sylvia Browne, run by Robert S. Lancaster. He just exhaustively archived every single failure.
And John Ronson, the journalist, wrote a scathing profile on her. He called her out for saying cruel, show-stopping things to people in distress. He recognized the theatricality of the cruelty.
Even John Oliver, years after she died, did a big segment on her Last Week Tonight. He really took the media to task for enabling what he called unscrupulous vultures to prey on grieving families.
Because the media was absolutely complicit. They gave her the megaphone. They never fact-checked her on air. They never brought up the Hornbeck case and said, explain this. They just nodded and went to a commercial break.
We mentioned she passed away, and in a final perfect twist of irony, she even got that prediction wrong.
She did. She famously predicted on Larry King Live back in 2003 that she would die at age 88.
A nice long life.
Sylvia Browne died on November 20, 2013. She was 77 years old.
She missed her own expiration date by 11 years. Even on the most personal prediction possible, Francine got the math wrong.
You'd think she'd have the inside track on that one.
But, and this is the part that really shows the incredible staying power of her brand, the story doesn't even end in 2013. In 2020, 7 years after her death, Sylvia Browne went viral.
The COVID-19 moment. I remember this taking over Twitter and Facebook. It was everywhere.
It was. Kim Kardashian tweeted it to her millions of followers. Everyone was sharing this photo of a page from her 2008 book, End of Days.
And the text was pretty spooky on the surface. It claimed that in around 2020, a severe pneumonia-like illness would spread throughout the globe.
When you read just that sentence out of context, it sends a shiver down your spine. Around 2020, pneumonia-like. It really sounds like a direct hit.
It does. It triggers that little dopamine hit of, aha, see? It was real.
Yeah.
But we have to be the buzzkills here and apply the context.
Please ruin the magic for us.
Well, that book was written in 2008, what had happened just 5 years prior to that. The SARS epidemic of 2003.
Which was a severe respiratory illness that spread globally.
Exactly. A novel coronavirus. Epidemiologists and scientists had been warning for years that another bigger respiratory pandemic was not a matter of if, but when.
So predicting a pneumonia-like illness in the future wasn't really psychic. It was just reading the newspaper and listening to scientists.
It's like predicting that California will have a wildfire around 2025.
Yeah.
It's a statistical certainty.
And didn't her prediction also say something about how the illness would end?
Yes, this is the part everyone forgets. The very next sentence in the book said the illness would suddenly vanish as quickly as it arrived.
Which is the exact opposite of what happened.
Not even close. We lived through years of it. It mutated. It did not vanish. So she got the what right because it was a generic science-based prediction, but she got the how completely and totally wrong.
It's the classic Texas sharpshooter fallacy, right?
It's the textbook example. She wrote 40 books. She made tens of thousands of predictions on TV and radio. If you fire that many bullets at the side of a barn, eventually one will hit the wood just by accident.
Then you go up and draw a bullseye around that one bullet hole and claim you were a master sniper all along.
And you just ignore the thousands and thousands of misses all over the wall. The Shawn Hornbecks, the Amanda Berries, the Sago Mines.
So we've audited the record. We have the felony fraud conviction. We have the documented 0% accuracy rate in solved cases. We have the cold reading. We have the live retrofitting. It's an absolutely damning file. But it leaves us with the biggest, most difficult question of all.
Why?
Why did millions of people buy her books? Why did they wait 4 years for that phone call? Why did Luana Miller believe her? Why did the Hornbeck family believe her?
That is the human mystery at the center of this entire story.
Is it just desperation?
Desperation is a huge part of it. But I think it's also about a deep human intolerance for uncertainty. The human brain hates a vacuum, not knowing where your child is, not knowing if they're alive or dead, if they're suffering. That is a psychological torture that is almost unbearable.
And Sylvia Browne offered the antidote to that uncertainty.
She didn't offer leads. She didn't offer investigation or possibilities. She offered the answer. She offered certainty.
Even if the answer was the worst possible one, he is dead, it's still an ending. It's a period at the end of a terrible sentence.
It is. It's closure. It allows the grieving process to start, even if, as we've seen, it's based on a complete lie. She sold a universe where things happen for a reason, where death isn't the end, where there's a plan, and where someone is in control and can tell you what that plan is.
She filled the void with certainty.
And in a chaotic, scary world, certainty is a product that will always, always have a buyer. Even if the product is defective, even if the manufacturer is a convicted fraud, people want the comfort more than they want the audit.
It reminds me of that old idea that it's often easier to believe a beautiful lie than a painful, complicated truth.
And Sylvia Browne was the absolute master of the beautiful lie. She wrapped it in the language of religion, she wrapped it in this tough love persona, and she sold it for $3 million a year.
So as we close the file on Sylvia Browne, what's the big takeaway? We can look at the stats and the studies and just say she was a fraud, but I feel like the lesson here is bigger than just her.
I think the lesson is about, for lack of a better term, consumer protection for your soul. It's about recognizing that when you are at your most vulnerable, when you are grieving, when you are lost, when you are scared, you are a target. There's an entire industry built to monetize that vulnerability.
We audit our taxes, we check the reviews on a toaster before we buy it on Amazon, but we rarely, if ever, audit the people we hand our hope to.
And we should, because as we saw so clearly with the Hornbeck case and the Berry case, false hope or false certainty can be just as damaging as no hope at all. It can stop you from looking for the real truth. It can rob you of the actual time you have left.
That is the provocative thought I think we should leave everyone with today. When you find yourself searching for answers in the dark, you have to ask yourself a very hard question. Are you actually looking for the truth, no matter how cold and silent and empty it might be?
Or are you just looking for someone to turn on a nightlight for you? Because with Sylvia Browne, you paid a very high price for that nightlight. But the monsters, the real ones, were still there in the room.
That is a powerful place to leave it. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us.
It was a pleasure.
And thank you all for listening. We'll see you on the next deep dive.